Okay, so we're starting now. Okay, starting so from Parak Vav, from the beginning of the sixth Parak. So till now we were talking about the human aspect of the creation, right? We were talking about that everything in the creation has like a humanoid symbolism, right? So now, so one aspect of this humanoid symbolism is eating and drinking, right? So this is the beginning of Parak Vav. And similarly, just like the connection, the chibur, the connection, the kiyum and sustenance, nishmas adam begufay, the soul of man within the body, right? Just like the continuing connection between the soul and the body, hu al yidei achila v'shtiya, is maintained through achila, eating, and shtiya, drinking. Ubiltom, and without that, tiporid v'testalik me'aguf, meaning without food a person will die, and therefore the soul will, and death is the separation of soul and from the body, right? Ubiltom tiporid v'testalik me'aguf. So without the eating and drinking, the soul will just leave the body. Kein chibur atzmusa is baruch Elohe. So too, and we kind of hinted to this idea before, the connection of the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Elohe Olam, to the world, right? Shehein soid ha'odam agodol, which is symbolized, right, as in this idea of ha'odam agodol, this big man, this giant man, right? This, so to speak, this humanoid expression of God. Kedei lehamidom ulekaimam v'loitigol nafshoy oisom. That in essence, I mean, the world is like almost a contradiction to the infinity that is God, and as a result, so kadela hamidam, and so therefore to maintain it, l'kaimam, and to sustain it, v'loitigal nafsho, that Hakadosh Baruch Hu's kind of soul should not reject the world. Gozra ritzona, his will decreed, is baruch shehei tolu be'esek haTorah, that it should be tolu, it should be dependent be'esek haTorah, in the involvement of Torah study, u'b'maseh mitzvahs, and the acts of mitzvah, be'avodas tefillah, and the service of prayer, shel am segula, of the holy nation. Who built them, and without these things, Hoyahu Yisbarach Misalik Atzmusa Yisbarach Mehem. HaKadosh Baruch will remove his essence from them, meaning the worlds. Meaning, right? So just like the maintenance of the soul within the body is done through eating and drinking, right? The nutrition for the body, but which maintains the soul within the body, is accomplished through eating and drinking. So too, there is an element of kind of an eating and drinking for God, meaning that maintains that connection between God's essence and the worlds that He created. And without those things, that the essence will reject this world. In this moment, without this sustenance, the worlds will cease to exist, will return to Ephes, to nothingness. So therefore, a rabbi said, "My diksiv." This is Gemara in Tainis. Gemara in Tainis says, "What is it written? Kike arba ruchos hashamayim parasti eschem." Hakadosh Baruch Hu says over there, like four directions. Ke arba ruchos, the four directions of the heavens. Parasti eschem, I have spread you out. So the Gemara over there darshans kashem shi efshul olam below ruchos is just like it's not possible. It's not physically possible for the world to be without wind, right? So too, it's impossible for the world to exist without Jews. So the way he's understanding this Chazal, the way he's understanding this Gemara is that the world can only exist if there is sustenance. That sustenance is accomplished via Jewish actions of mitzvah, spiritual actions of mitzvah. Without that spiritual connection of the Jewish people, there's no possibility for the world to exist, and therefore, just like it's impossible for the world without wind, so too it's impossible for the world without Jews. That's how he's understanding. And he's going to elaborate on this idea in this Hagah over here. So the Hagah says, so if you look at Zohar, Ayin Zohar, the Arba Yisoidin, now there are four elements, right? The four basic elements that the ancient Greeks had. This is kind of a Jewish idea. The four elements, Arma, right? That stands for Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Offer, which is fire, wind, water, and dirt, and land, earth. So right, so people understood that when people read this in Aristotle and other philosophers, they understand that, physically, that's the table of elements, the four elements. But it's not how we understand it. We understand it as a spiritual idea. So there are these four elements, inun kadmoi v'shorshin d'leila. They are considered to be the roots of existence, the roots of creation. V'satoin v'loin alaykaim, and everything above and below is dependent on these four elements, right? V'inun arba sitrei alma, and they are the four directions of the world, right? So we see that, right, that the existence of the world is dependent on these four basic elements. Again, spiritual ideas, but the four basic elements. I'm not going to go into what the four elements represent now. So the Zohar connects the four elements to the four directions of space. And look at another place in Zohar where it says that via the good elements of human beings, that they are symbolized also by the four angels in the chariot. Right, if you remember that these four animals on the chariot, right? Also the four in the prophet Yechezkel describes the four chayos. So these are the same idea here, B'dalad Ruchos Ha'olam, and they are symbolized again in the four directions of the world, right? And Alidei Shoresh Shorshan, and the root of all of that, the root of the four elements and the four malachim. What's the root? Shemin Dalit Oisios Havaya Baruch Hu, the root of the four letters of the four-letter name, the tetragrammaton, as it's called, the four-letter name of Hashem. That's the root of the entire creation. From the four directions comes the wind. I'm not sure exactly what the reference here is, but right, what he's trying to say in this Haggadah is that, I guess you could, again, there are many layers to this. This is a short Haggadah, and there are many layers to the ideas that are expressed here. But just to give one idea, is that like the four elements are represented, let's say, by the four midos of human beings, right? So, for example, Eish sometimes is symbolized via anger, right? Ruach, wind, is symbolized by just levity and kind of lightheadedness, and Mayim is symbolic of I believe of love, because it's I don't know, I'm not sure why, but I think and earth is symbolic of like heaviness and laziness. So therefore so there's a balance between all of these forces within the human being, and so when people don't have their midos lined up, it's not just, we're not saying that that's okay. You don't have your midos lined up. No, your whole life is about correcting your midos, and via the correcting your midos, you kind of like restructuring the balance of the whole world. Because again, remember, like we said in the whole book, is that everything is Tzelem Elokim. You are the master of the world. Hashem put up the whole world dependent on human actions and human behaviors and human thoughts and speeches, etc. So everything that we do is connected to the four basic elements, which are connected to the four chayes, which are connected to the four names of Hashem, because again, it's all one kind of multi-layered framework. So what he's saying is, right, so this Gemara that says that like the four winds, so too, right, just like the world can't exist without the four winds, so too it can't exist without Jews. Saying there's another layer of understanding besides what I said, that you need the Jews to do the mitzvahs, to maintain the world. There's another layer that specifically in the number 4 that represents the four elements, that also is maintained by the mitzvahs and by avodah, by the service, and again the midos and etc. All of that. Okay. So let's continue. V'hu shomer b'vayikra Rabba, and this idea.
This is main text.
Right. This is back to the main text. V'hu shomer b'vayikra Rabba. Now he's going back to the idea of eating and drinking. Over there, the Medrash continues. Borchi nafshi es Hashem. Again, this is a continuation of what we already started. Borchi nafshi es Hashem. David HaMelech says, "My soul blesses Hashem," and the Gemara says, "But v'chima ro David liyos mekales b'nafsho le'Hakadosh Baruch Hu." What did David see that he praised Hashem via his nefesh, via the symbolism of his nefesh, of his soul? Ella Omar. So we said before that so there's these 5 comparisons between human soul and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And so one of the comparisons was just like the nefesh, the soul fills the whole body, so does HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Another comparison is just like Elamah HaNefesh, HaNefesh HaZois, this soul, Eino Echeles Baguf, it doesn't really eat the physical food, right? Even though this is kind of in contrast to what he said before. Before he said that eating sustains the connection between the body and soul. But in reality, the soul does not get any sustenance from the physical food, right? So ma hanefesh hazois eino echeles baguf. It doesn't really eat the physical food. VaHaKadosh Baruch Hu ein lefonov. So to Hashem doesn't really have achila. Doesn't eat. Doesn't eat any food. Right? So we're going to explain what that means. A similar idea is expressed in Medrash Tehillim, Mizmor, just like a nefesh, the soul, doesn't drink, doesn't eat, doesn't drink. So to HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not eat and doesn't drink. Now, what is the Medrash saying? Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have any of the physical pleasures, benefits, right? Yeah. Why did it single out HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't eat and doesn't drink, right? Neither does he sleep, neither does he, take walks, neither does he enjoy, the ocean. I mean, what's the point, right? So he's saying, we're not just telling you that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have these physical qualities. There is another layer, Hishmiyonu Zeha Inyan Hanal. What the Medrash is trying to express is another idea. That even though the soul itself, the soul in its essence, does not drink, doesn't eat and doesn't drink, im kol zeh, but still a no. As we said before, Harei kol ikar chibra nefesh im aguf ke'echad, the continued connection between the nefesh and the body, as one. Vikiyumo and its sustenance, mispar yom v'katzumif, to maintain his life during the number of his days. Hu tolui al yidei ma'achelu siyas aguf. It's still dependent on nutrition,
the well-being of the
right. V'keina inyan, so too im kivada, for it's certainly shle'atzmo sa'odin, to the essence of the master, Yochid, the true, right, the only one. Ein Soif, infinite one. Baruch Hu, blessed be He. Ein Nageh Chas v'Sholem Shum Ma'aseh mitzvahs. Meaning, even if we take that eating and drinking as symbolic of mitzvahs, but to the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as he mentioned above, even the mitzvahs don't really do anything for the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Because we if we said before, if you do tzedakah, what are you giving? You cannot add glory to the essence of Hashem. You cannot take away glory of Hashem. So just like this, so on one again, so this is the comparison is such. I'm just going to speak it out first, and then I'll read it inside. Just like so we have two statements of Chazal, and one says that compares eating and drinking to the connection between body and soul, to maintenance of body and soul. And the other one that says that no, the soul doesn't eat, right? Just like the soul doesn't eat, so to HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't eat. So we're saying, put both together, they're really saying two sides of the same coin. He's saying that to the essence of the soul and the essence of Hashem, there is no physical food. Right. So there's no physical food to the neshama. So too, there is no food for Hashem. What's the food for Hashem? But meaning to the essence of Hashem, there's no food. Even the mitzvahs, there's no food. Right. But he did set up a system in which the food, just like it maintains the connection between body and soul, so too the food, which is the mitzvahs, maintains the connection between Hashem and the world.
So just like the body needs to eat to be functional and be able to host the soul,
right,
you have to do the mitzvahs so that the world
right. Even though the soul by itself doesn't really need the food, right. But somehow the food maintains the connection. so too the essence of Hashem doesn't need the mitzvahs, but somehow the mitzvahs do maintain the connection. Right? Okay. So let's read this now inside. Right? So certainly to the essence of the Master, blessed be He, it doesn't touch him any act of mitzvah, of Torah or Torah of avodah klal at all. He doesn't care about it at all on the level of essence. Like we've written before. Kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eina, I'm sorry, like it's written here, Kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eina Oichel Ve'eina Shoyses. That's what it means when it says, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not eat and does not drink. Just like we said above in the 4th chapter. Amnam, however, Kol Ikar Inyan Hischabruso Yisborach Elolos. The entire ability of the entire continued connection of Hashem to the worlds, that they should function together, that He arranged them, they should function together like a form of man in all of these details, and just like the limbs that are dependent on food. So His will decreed that everything should be dependent on the actions, the good actions of His holy nation. Because, and that is what is referred to by achila v'shtiya lo'olomis, the eating and drinking of the worlds. Those are the eating and drinking of the worlds that maintain this connection between Hashem and the worlds. La'amidam, to maintain them, l'kayom, to sustain them, and to increase the power of their holiness, v'oyram, and their light, al yideis ischabruso yisborach aleim kiroi, through the intensified connection, proper connection between Hashem and the worlds. Whatever the rots and the will of Hashem decreed. Hakol lefi roiv ha'maaseh shel am segula. All it depends on the quantity of the good deeds of the chosen nation. Sheheima misak ha-misaknim, they are the ones who are fixing, u'me'achedim, and uniting, ha'olomis, the worlds, sheyiyu ru'uyim lekabel shiva so'or v'tosefes kedushas baruch. They should be worthy to accept the light and the additional kedusha of Hashem. Ke'inyan hamozon, just like food, shehu moisif koich baguf u'me'aden oisoi. Just like food, which gives you energy, right, and gives you a feeling of well-being, right? And now he's going to elaborate this. If you see this Aleph, Beis, and Gimel, there are 3 different footnotes that he wants to say, right? But the basic idea is pretty clear, right? That there is achila v'shtiya in a physical man. There is achila v'shtiya in the world. Okay, but the achila v'shtiya in the world is the spiritual achila v'shtiya. Now, the first Hagah, the first footnote. Actually, no. Let's get back to the footnotes. Let's just continue with the main text. V'zeu inyan hakosov, and this is what the pasuk is saying. This is the pasuk in Mishlei. Lechu lachmu b'lachmi. Go eat my bread, right? So Hashem says? Go eat my bread. What's His bread, right? What bread is Hashem's bread? Right? Shepirushu Razal, exactly like the rabbis explained, the Chagiga and Barai Mehemna and the Zoyar with Parshas Ekev, right? Ein Shom Hainu B'Lachmi Mamash, really my bread. Kaviyochol Lachma Yisborach, as much as really as close as a comparison to bread as you can, meaning that it's as if Hashem is being sustained by this, right? Lachmi, my bread. He calls it my bread, meaning these mitzvahs, these actions of Hashem, of people, is considered like sustenance for Hashem. Which, right, the Zohar says, Takin psoiro l'maroch, prepare a table for your master, right? So prepare a table for your master. Again, we are kind of feeding, with our actions, we are feeding or again, providing nutrition for the world to exist. Okay, now let's go back to the Hagah. Right? So the first Hagah says like this. It says, V'gamal nishmasa odom atzmai. Now this Hagon originally appeared that the spiritual food for Hashem, even though the essence doesn't need it, right? He arranged it so that it becomes necessary for the worlds to be maintained together, right? So he says, but you can extend that comparison even to the soul of man. V'gamal nishmas ha'odam atzmoi. B'kohelas Shabbos im pasuk yites, ein toiv ba'odam sheyochel v'shosa. So even we say, when we're talking about human beings, we oftentimes use the metaphor, right? The metaphor of eating and drinking as a metaphor for spiritual deeds, right? So, like for example, so when the Koheles, so the Medrash on Koheles says that whenever Koheles uses Kol achila v'shtia shenemar b'Megillah Azois, that any words of achila and shtia, eating and drinking, that's mentioned in Koheles, but Torah of Maisim Tovim Akosu Medaber, it's speaking about Torah and Maisim Tovim and good deeds, right? So if you read Koheles and it says, there's nothing better than just enjoying life and eating and drinking, Shlomo Melech was not writing literally. That's a metaphor. The metaphor of eating and drinking is spiritual things, living a life of spirituality.
Right, but doesn't he say later on that he turned around and he realized that eating and drinking was not the...
Well, okay, so I'm saying this.
Okay.
This is the Zohar's interpretation.
Okay.
And the Medrash. V'cheinu emershom b'siman hey pasuk yudaladu b'siman ches pasuk yud beis. Another three places where it says a similar idea. Uksiv, in the pasuk Yeshayahu says, Imru tzadik kitov, tell the tzadik that it is good. Pri ma'alalehem yachelu, for they eat the fruit of their actions. Ma'alalehem means like their actions, right? So we see even over there that tzaddik. What do tzaddikim eat? They eat the fruit of their labor, right? The fruit of their actions. So we see again eating the fruit of your actions. Obviously, it's a figurative speech. Right. It's not literal speech. And similarly, vice versa, the opposite is also true. It says and they ate from the fruits of their ways. Right? So often we find, I mean, it's a simple metaphor. Often we use food as a metaphor of, you eat what you sow, or, that's again, Uberaya Mehemna, the Mezoina, and the same thing in Zohar, the Mezoina, the Araisa, Ihi Mezoina, the Neiron, that the food of the Torah is the food, the Neiron, meaning the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, is the three layers of the soul. Right? So really, the soul does not eat the physical bread, as this Medrash says over here, but the soul does eat, quote unquote, spiritual bread, which is another metaphor for spiritual bread. That the soul kind of feeds on our spiritual actions. V'shom b'Parshas Pinchas, similar again in Parshas Pinchas, the neshama is parnasas b'milin deraisa. The neshama, the soul, is sustained, gets parnasa, sustenance, b'milin deraisa, from the words of Torah. The inun nahamolah, for these words are like bread to her. Ki inya nahama the gufa memilin de alma, just like the bread, the physical bread to the body. Right? V'shom, again, another place, the nafsha the isaskas be'araisa, when a soul is learning Torah, melechem avio tochel. That's what the pasuk is referring to. From the bread of her father does she eat, right? So it's the bread of her father. The soul's father is Hashem, and so learning Torah is symbolized by eating the bread of her father. And that's why also even Olam Haba is compared in Gemara Brachas. Olam Haba is compared to, you have tzaddikim are sitting around the table, and their crowns are on their heads, and they're eating and drinking. Right? So again, we find this continuous use of eating and drinking as a metaphor for spiritual things. Right? We say in Tehillim, that's what we say, these Tehillim by Shabbos meals. Arrange before me a table. Right? It's not referring to a physical table, we're referring to a spiritual table. this, and that's what it says, go eat my bread, right? Go eat my bread. Hashem's bread is spiritual, can't be physical, right? So the idea here, I mean, again, so there's, I don't know, there's a lot of, if you keep digesting this in your mind, you will see there's a lot of layers over here, and that is that the world is by definition is one thing. It's a unit. It's a unity of physical and spiritual things, right? And everything we do, we try to bring out the spiritual, to identify, to crystallize, to extract the spiritual from the physical, right? Which is why, so especially eating and drinking, we say you have to say divrei Torah by your table, right? You're bringing out the idea that you're not just stuffing your body, you're transforming it into a spiritual activity. When we eat food, we make a bracha. We finish eating, we make a bracha. All of these activities are surrounded with spiritual aspects. But that's just, again, these are hints to tell you that maybe there are layers. Tzaddikim eat even their actual food. If you learn Mesilas Yesharim from start to finish, when you get to that last layer of kedusha, he says that really it's a true tzaddik, which is a chassid, a kodesh, a holy person, transforms even the actual physical act of eating into a spiritual event, because there's really the entire world is just a screen. There is really no physical. The whole thing is a screen. It's just a matter of unlocking the spiritual within the physical, which is everywhere. It's ever present, because it's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu that just kind of hid himself within the world, like we mentioned already before, that the word olam, right, which means world in Hebrew, comes from the Hebrew word aleim, which means to hide, right? So the world it's all spiritual, and it's just, again, we are not on that level. Our food is a very physical experience, and we just add some divrei Torah to give it a little bit of a spiritual flavor. But a tzaddik can see, that an apple, everything is a metaphor. Everything is pregnant with ideas that symbolize spiritual things. And so the Medrash says, for example, when Moshe went to greet Yisro, Rashi says, right, and they came went to eat lifnei ha'elakim. I forget exactly how Rashi says it, but Rashi says that when Talmidei Chachamim eat, they're as if they're eating lifnei ha'elakim. They're like eating before God, because their physical, there's no such thing as a physical. Their whole existence is only spiritual. They see the spiritual in everything, in every bite is spiritual. Again, there's a reason why Kosh Baruch created an apple and bread, and why we sustain ourselves from bread. These are all symbolic. Not just the general idea of food is symbolic. Each particular food is symbolic of something, and it's just being able to be so plugged into HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you see the world from His eyes, not from our eyes, kind of outside in. You see it from the inside out. Okay, so that's the first Hagor. Second Hagor. Second Hagor says, he's saying there, even within food, there are layers. And I'm just going to speak out the idea that he wants to bring out is that you could eat, like they ate in the Holocaust, which is, they didn't die, but they barely survived. They were right. They were malnourished, and right. So there's eating on that basic level just to maintain the connections, just to survive. And then there is the eating that's I'm having a good time. I'm nutritional food. It's giving me energy and pleasure, and makes me all red cheeked and look so healthy. And right. So he's saying that same symbolism could be extended to spiritual things. You could quote unquote eat or feed the world on a level of like, okay, Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't destroy the world today, right? You maintain kind of the initial, or you could do what Kadosh Baruch Hu intended, which is to continue to bring more and more nutrition into the world, to strengthen that connection between Hashem and the world, to make the world a better place, again, through these actions. So you could infuse it with more of Hashem's essence, right? So we're extending we're just continually, what he's doing is extending the mashal, the metaphor of eating and drinking in every kind of direction. So let's read it inside. Just like by food, they're macholim, they're foods that their purpose is only to strengthen the original four elements in the body, just to maintain them with their original vigor, their original force. But there are other foods, they increase the power of the four elements in a qualitative way. Now, and every person, regular person, I'm saying not a spiritual person, but a regular person, he wants to eat in order to make himself to feel as good as possible, as healthy as possible, as invigorated as possible. A person doesn't want to be satisfied with just a morsel of bread and exactly just enough to survive. To reach the bar of his survival. So too the soul is not satisfied with just miserly food, of Torah and good deeds. And this is really all of what the purpose of man. To increase Torah and to increase mitzvahs. Until he pulls down the increase of kedusha, ubracha and blessing, bil yoinim v'tachtoinim, up above and so below. Yoser al kedei midas hakav, more than the original measure, shenota aboyres baruch beis habriya, that Hashem planted at the time of creation, right? So the initial creation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world at some initial level of sustenance, and then our job is to continuously enrich it, right? So, of course, he's going to say that the next Nago is going to mention, of course, the Chet Odom Arishin, which also came again through eating, right? But okay, so Kumavur Be'etz Chaim Shekol Avodeseinu Hu Lahamshich Makifim Behis Rachafus or Godlog, and these are words already that are above my understanding. That the Eitz Chaim, which is again the Torah of Arizal. From Rav Chaim Vital, he says that all of our avoida is to pull down makifim encirclers. I don't know what this means. In order to increase the great light, yoiser akadei mitas kav or hayosher, more than the original straight light, shehimshim hu yizborach beis habriya, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu pulled down at the time of creation, l'tzorich echrach chiyus v'kiyam oilomas, for the purpose of basic survival of the world. Okay, so there's two ideas. There's some kind of a light that encircles. There's some kind of a light that penetrates. So initially, the creation, there was a straight light, and then a person's job is to bring down this circular light. Again, words that we have no understanding. Okay, so next Hagah, Hagah number 3.
Yeah.
All right, the Hagah number 3. Again, goes to the idea of food that invigorates, that gives energy, doesn't just sustain, right? So he says, so too exactly is a person's eating down below. If you think about it, we don't just eat food the way it grows, right? Usually there's some preparation that's involved to get rid of what's called psoilus, chaff, right? Or any imperfections or spoilage, right? That we first, there's a process of making the food a little more pure. So too is the food of the worlds and the purity of our actions, im me'at ve'im harbe, whether little, whether a lot, right? So not only is there quantity of food, right? There's also the quality of food, right? We want to have the food to be the highest quality. So therefore, koidam chet odam arishan, right? Meaning he's saying that it's not enough to do just a mitzvah. I did a mitzvah, I put on tefillin today. That's food for the world, but there are different ways you could put on tefillin, right? You could purify it from, to make it more nutritious, so to speak. So therefore, before the sin of the first man, his foods, even the physical foods, were completely clean and purified from all and any any unnecessary parts, any psoilus, any discard. Okay, right? V'omru, and further the Gemara says, Shamalachim or yutzoilin loy boser, that the malachim would roast him meat, umisanin lo yain, and filter for him wine. Okay, now even though Adam Rishon was a vegetarian, right? But I guess this is symbolic, right? What does it mean? The malachim. The point is that the malachim were doing it, and right. I was going to explain. Be'inyan zeh hatzliya v'asin. Why was it roasting and filtering? It doesn't say they were pouring wine. It says they were filtering for him wine. Shekol kach godla koyach nafshe shel Adam Rishon, that his soul was on such a level, soid Adam kadmo, that he was connected to the kind of the macrocosm of that Adam that we were talking about, that symbolizes the entire creation. Yoiser me'erech kol koiches el yoina, more than all the forces of the highest forces. So that the malachim had to roast for him meat. Roasting is done with fire, right? So there's a symbolic of spiritual fire. It needed purification. Eish oichla eish, again, words that I don't understand. Fire eats fire. Mashiv she'iv kol shum aviyos amachal shlefi erko yagavoy. They needed to purify it so thoroughly, right? It doesn't mean roasting. They were doing barbecue for him. It means that they were purifying the food to such a degree, because he was on such a high spiritual level. It had to be completely pure of any imperfection. V'gam simchas hayayin, and so to the happiness that comes with the wine, ha'elyon, hoya misunon, had to be completely filtered out, mikol shmorim, from any asadak, residue. Shelefi goiva erkoi, because again, according to his high stature, ki inyan yayin hameshumar be'anovav, and this is symbolized by wine that's set aside, that Hashem set aside in the beginning of creation. V'achrachet, of course, after the sin, she'erev ra b'toiv, where he mixed, right, the whole eating. We said that, right? He took. We said this eating is symbolized that he ingested kind of evil into himself, and therefore mixed up the good and evil in one shot. So therefore, the food itself is also becomes imperfect, and that's why it says koitz v'dardar. His punishment is you will eat. You will grow. I'm saying at first you will grow weeds, right? And you'll have to separate, and you have to work for your food. And and you will eat bread by the sweat of your brow. Sweat is excrement, and you're getting rid of something unnecessary, right? So that's what it is. It's our whole avoida is really becomes purification, separating the good from the bad.
And the nachash ends up eating gums.
And ends up eating dirt, right? Now, if you remember, we mentioned that the Dora Midbar, the generation of the desert before Koidim Chet Egel, before the sin of the golden calf, they reached the level of Odom before the Chet. So similarly, that's why what was their food? Be'inyan Aman. They were zoicha to eat from the man. Again, that was purified food without any imperfections. Shehefigam shara macholim v'nivla be'evareim, was completely absorbed in all of their in all their limbs. K'moish omru perak yom kippurim, right? Elamani mekayim v'yosei tia alecho ala zaynecha, right? So the Gemara says over there. This was just in last week's parsha, not last week's, the previous week's parsha. right? The Kadosh Baruch Hu command that the Jews within the camp they had to carry with them a little shovel. Why? In order to cover up any excrement because they have to keep the camp pure. What Gemara says? What do you mean? They were eating man. There should be nothing to shovel, right? No. So the Gemara says no. Le'achar shesorcho. That's before. There's a difference. They're different. Before the sin and after the sin, there were different levels. Meaning, so there must okay. So it seems like even with the man, there were different levels.
They were changed, so the man,
right. So the man had
the man tolerance went down,
or the man also became impure. I'm not sure. But that's what the Gemara says. And in the future, regarding the future, the Gemara says in Shabbos that in the future, Eretz Yisrael, Gemara says, it will make ready cookies. Meaning cookies will grow from the ground, or cakes will grow from the ground, right? That doesn't mean that you planted a seed and a ready baked cake came out. It means again that if you think about it, again from the seed that is planted to the cake that is baked, how many steps have to happen. First you have to grow it, then you have to water it, then you have to separate it, then you have to grind it, then you have to bake it. So we're saying that all of that, the Eretz Yisrael will not have the need for those impurities. The food will be pure. Spiritual. Again, it doesn't mean that we might still have to do all of the processes, but the point is that the end result will be completely spiritually pure food.
Is the food that the Meraglim picked up, is that in any way related?
I'm not sure, because meaning I don't know if that's the food that we're talking about, but clearly. If the fruit of Eretz Yisrael is right,
the time is spent talking about food that they brought.
Right, meaning the fruit of Eretz Yisrael was always considered to be symbolically more pure because it's closer. Meaning there could be levels, right? So the food of Eretz Yisrael is closer to the spiritual source, and as a result, it's a little less imperfect, right? So they went to bring food, and that's why also Moshe Rabbeinu says, "I want to go into Eretz Yisrael to eat." Like to go and eat its fruit, right? That's what we also say in our blessing, right? When will we zoicher to go to Israel and eat its fruit? Okay, so that's the end of the third Hagos. So what did we get from the Hagos? So the point is, if you think about it, let's just recap, and I guess we'll stop right here. Is that what we have come to understand here is that there's a metaphor, there is a symbolic connection between eating and drinking and spiritual actions, right? And he extended that symbolic connections on a few levels. First, the basic connection. Just like a person needs eating and drinking to sustain himself, so does the world needs spiritual eating and drinking to sustain itself. That's the basic connection. Within that basic connections, he said three other layers. The first of all, even the person himself, the soul, is not really maintained by the physical eating and drinking. It's maintained by the spiritual aspect of the world, either within the eating and drinking or with other spiritual actions. So the soul itself is strengthened via the mitzvahs, not just the world, but the soul itself. Secondly, that just like you could eat to bare minimum, or but people generally want to eat in order to be energized and satisfied and feel good. So learning and davening and doing mitzvahs should also be on that level, not just on the level of basic. I did what the basic that Hakadosh Baruch Hu requires, but no, I did as much as I can in order to feed with the best and the most. And the third layer, it was just like the food can be pure and impure, right, healthy or unhealthy, so too mitzvahs could also be pure and impure, healthy and unhealthy. Meaning, various would be unhealthy, but mitzvahs could be pure and impure, and all of this is reflected before Chet Advam Rishon, right? Before the Chet Egel, and in the future Los Love, when we come to Mashiach and the world is rectified to its original spiritual state. Okay, let's stop here.